Hi, I'm Katrina. Before I delve into my tale, please like and subscribe to follow my journey through the shadows of my past. Now, let me take you back to where it all started, in a grand mansion that was both my prison and my unlikely source of revelation. In the heart of a sprawling mansion, I moved silently, almost invisibly, among the opulent corridors and lavish rooms. Despite being raised here, this place never felt like home. I was just a servant in the eyes of Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, the couple who owned the mansion. They always treated me with a distant kindness, nothing more. I thought I knew my place, until that fateful day in the attic. "Katrina, we need those old drapes from the attic. Make it quick." Mrs. Harrington's sharp voice cut through the morning air. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. As I rummaged through dusty boxes in the attic, my hand brushed against a small, hidden compartment. Curiosity piqued, I opened it to find a stack of old, yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. My heart pounded as I recognized the handwriting. It was my mother's, a woman I barely remembered. "Dear Katrina, if you are reading this, then the time has come for you to know the truth," the letter began. My hands trembled as the words revealed the unimaginable. I was the daughter of the mansion's previous owners, dear friends of the Harringtons. My parents had died in an accident, leaving me orphaned. The Harringtons took me in, not out of kindness, but to control the wealth and legacy my parents left behind. I couldn't believe it. My whole life, a lie. Anger boiled within me as I thought of how I'd been deceived, treated as nothing more than a servant in my own home. "I see you found them." A deep old voice echoed from the doorway. It was Mr. Jenkins, the elderly butler, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of secrets. "Mr. Jenkins, is it true? Am I really—" I couldn't finish the sentence, the truth too overwhelming. He walked over, his steps slow but steady. "Yes, Katrina, it's true. Your parents were wonderful people. The Harringtons promised to care for you, but after the will was read, things changed." "Why didn't you tell me?" I demanded, tears stinging my eyes. "It wasn't my place, and I feared for you. But you deserve to know. You deserve your rightful place in this world," he said, his voice tinged with regret. The revelation shattered the world as I knew it. I needed answers, and it was time for me to claim my birthright. But I also knew it wouldn't be easy. The Harringtons wouldn't give up without a fight. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to face whatever came next. "Hey, Katrina, you seem different these days. What's up?" The cook, Martha, eyed me curiously as I helped her peel potatoes in the kitchen. "Just thinking about future plans," I said, a hint of mystery in my voice. Martha laughed. "Planning to win the lottery and escape this place?" "Something like that," I replied, smiling slyly. Later, in the garden, I bumped into Sam, the young gardener. He always had a soft spot for me. "Katrina, you look troubled. Everything okay?" Sam asked, leaning on his rake. "I've discovered something about my past. I need to gather evidence. Can you help me?" My voice was low but determined. "You know I'd do anything for you. Just say the word," Sam said, his loyalty clear in his eyes. That night, I met with a young lawyer, David, at a quiet cafe in town. He was an old school friend who ended up in law. "Katrina, this is serious. You're claiming the Harringtons have committed fraud and you're the rightful heir." David looked over the documents I'd handed him. "Yes, and I need your help to prove it. I know it's a lot to ask." My voice trailed off. David leaned forward, his expression resolute. "We'll do this together. You deserve justice, Katrina." The following weeks were a whirlwind. I gathered snippets of conversations, documents, anything that could prove my claim and the Harringtons' illegal activities. Martha and Sam helped where they could, passing me information and keeping their ears open. One evening, I overheard Mr. Harrington talking on the phone in his study. "Can't risk anyone finding out about the offshore accounts. Make sure that paper trail is buried deep." His voice was tense, unaware of my presence outside the door. I quickly scribbled down notes. This was the proof I needed. David would know how to use this information. The next day, Martha handed me an old, crumpled letter she found while cleaning. "I thought you should see this, Katrina. It's addressed to you, from your mother, I think." Martha's voice was gentle, understanding the weight of her find. The letter was another piece of the puzzle, revealing more about my parents and their relationship with the Harringtons. It was clear they had never intended for me to be treated like this. With David's guidance, I started setting traps to catch the Harringtons. We planned a small event at the mansion, inviting local journalists under the guise of a charity fundraiser. "Make sure everything is perfect, Katrina. This event is very important to us," Mrs. Harrington instructed me, unaware of the real reason behind the event. "Of course, Mrs. Harrington. Everything will be as you wish," I said with a hidden smirk. At the event, I subtly steered conversations, letting slip hints of the Harringtons' questionable financial dealings. The journalists pricked up their ears, smelling a story. "And have you heard about the Harringtons' latest investment? Quite the controversy, I hear," I whispered to one curious reporter, pretending to be oblivious to the implications. The seeds were planted. Rumors started to swirl, and the journalists began digging deeper. In the midst of all this, I had to play my part as the obedient servant, all while orchestrating the downfall of the people who had controlled my life. It was a dangerous game, but I was determined to win. As the night drew to a close, Mr. Harrington pulled me aside, his eyes narrowing. "Katrina, there are rumors circulating. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" His voice was a mix of suspicion and threat. I looked him straight in the eye. "Mr. Harrington, I'm just a servant. What could I possibly know about such matters?" He stared at me for a moment longer before walking away, but I could tell he was worried. The web of deceit was starting to unravel. In the bustling ambiance of a high society event at the mansion, I circulated among guests, a tray in hand. To them, I was just a servant, but my true role tonight was far more crucial. "So I've heard the Harringtons have some interesting financial practices," I whispered to Mr. Grady, a known gossip and influential businessman, as I refilled his drink. Mr. Grady raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "Oh? Do tell." "It's just rumors, of course," I said, feigning innocence. "Something about offshore accounts and dubious investments." Mr. Grady chuckled. "That's juicy. I'll have to look into it." I moved on, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion with a mix of subtlety and precision. This was my battlefield, and I was winning. In the library, I overheard a heated discussion between Mrs. Harrington and one of her high-profile friends, Mrs. Dawson. "I can't believe these rumors about us, Helen. People are starting to ask questions," Mrs. Harrington lamented, a rare crack in her usually composed demeanor. Mrs. Dawson sipped her wine, her eyes sharp. "You need to squash these rumors, Vivian, before they ruin us." I left them to their worries, a smirk on my lips. In the gardens, I found Mr. Harrington talking to Senator Wallace, an influential political figure. "I assure you, Senator, our finances are completely legitimate," Mr. Harrington was saying, his voice strained. Senator Wallace looked skeptical. "These rumors are concerning, Gerald. I hope for your sake they're not true." As the evening wore on, I continued my work. The mansion was abuzz with whispers and sideways glances. The Harringtons were losing their grip, and everyone could feel it. At the climax of the evening, during a grand toast, I accidentally tripped, sending a glass of red wine cascading down Mrs. Harrington's pristine white dress. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Harrington. How clumsy of me," I exclaimed, feigning distress. The crowd gasped, and all eyes were on us. Mrs. Harrington stood frozen, her face a mask of shock and rage. "This is what happens when you trust servants with no breeding," she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. The guests murmured, their expressions a mix of shock and disapproval. Mrs. Harrington had just publicly humiliated me, but she'd also shown her true colors. Mr. Harrington rushed over, his face red with anger. "What is this, Katrina? You're causing a scene." I looked at him, my expression one of hurt innocence. "It was an accident, Mr. Harrington. I apologize." The guests started talking among themselves, the rumors and truths mingling into a potent mix of scandal. "That's the girl who's supposedly the real heir, right?" I heard someone whisper. "Yes, the poor thing. Treated like a servant in her own home," another guest replied, sympathy in their voice. As the night ended and the guests left, the damage was done. The Harringtons' reputation was tarnished, their secrets teetering on the edge of public exposure. In the aftermath, in the quiet of the servants' quarters, I couldn't help but smile. The Harringtons were on the defensive, their power waning. My plan was working, and justice for my parents was within reach. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead, In a bustling courtroom, filled with the hum of anticipation, I sat next to David, my lawyer. The Harringtons were across the room, looking unnervingly composed. "Katrina, are you ready? It's not just about proving your identity. It's about exposing their fraud," David whispered, shuffling his papers. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied, a determined fire in my eyes. The judge called the court to order, and the room hushed. The battle for my legacy and justice was about to begin. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, you stand accused of financial fraud, embezzlement, and the illegal usurpation of Katrina's inheritance. How do you plead?" The judge's voice echoed in the courtroom. "Not guilty, Your Honor," Mr. Harrington said confidently, his voice steady. The proceedings were long and tense. David presented the evidence meticulously: financial records, the letters from my mother, testimonies from mansion staff, and the information I had gathered. As David cross-examined Mrs. Harrington, the tension was palpable. "So, Mrs. Harrington, can you explain these offshore accounts linked to your name?" David's voice was calm, but firm. "It's all legal, I assure you. Those accounts are for our charitable donations," Mrs. Harrington replied, trying to appear confident. "But isn't it true that these so-called donations were never declared in your tax filings?" David countered, his words striking like a hammer. Mrs. Harrington faltered, her facade cracking. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Outside the courtroom, a tenacious journalist, Linda, was gathering reactions for her news segment. She pulled me aside. "Katrina, this trial is explosive. What do you hope to achieve with this?" Linda's microphone was inches from my face. "I want justice. Not just for me, but for the truth. The Harringtons have deceived everyone for too long," I said, my voice resolute, echoing the sentiment of every wronged soul in that mansion. The trial continued for days. Each revelation swung public opinion more in my favor. The Harringtons' once impeccable reputation crumbled under the weight of evidence. In the climax of the trial, David presented a crucial piece of evidence, a video recording of Mr. Harrington discussing the cover-up of my true identity. "Your Honor, this video clearly shows Mr. Harrington acknowledging Katrina's rightful inheritance," David stated, playing the video for the court. Mr. Harrington sat there, mouth agape, as his own words condemned him. The courtroom erupted in murmurs and gasps. The judge banged his gavel. "Order! I will have order in my court." After hours of deliberation, the judge was ready to give the verdict. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. "The evidence presented is overwhelming and clear. I hereby recognize Katrina as the rightful heir to the estate and find the Harringtons guilty of fraud and embezzlement," the judge declared, his voice resounding through the courtroom. I felt a wave of relief and vindication wash over me. Tears welled up in my eyes, but they were tears of triumph. Linda caught me outside the courthouse. "Katrina, you've won. The public supports you. How does it feel?" "It feels like a new beginning, Linda. A chance to right wrongs and start anew," I said, my voice steady but emotional. Back at the mansion, the staff welcomed me with open arms. I was no longer a servant. I was their rightful owner, their savior from the Harringtons' tyranny. As I walked through the halls of my ancestral home, I felt a sense of peace and purpose. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was justice for my parents and all those wronged by the Harringtons. The halls of the mansion, now rightfully mine, echoed with a mix of triumph and the weight of what had transpired. As I walked through, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington approached me, their expressions a blend of remorse and desperation. "Katrina, we deeply regret everything. We were wrong, and we're sorry," Mr. Harrington stammered, his voice unsteady. I looked at them, my gaze steady and unwavering. "Your apologies can't undo the past. You made me a servant in my own home." Mrs. Harrington's eyes were filled with tears. "We've lost everything. We have nowhere to go. Please, can you find it in your heart to forgive us?" I paused, feeling a surge of emotions. "Forgiveness isn't mine to give. You must live with the consequences of your actions, as I have lived with mine." Leaving them standing in the grand foyer, a symbol of their downfall, I walked away, resolute in my decision. As days passed, I focused on rebuilding the mansion and its operations. Martha, Sam, and the rest of the staff, now treated with the respect and kindness they deserved, were invaluable in this new chapter. "Katrina, the staff is so happy. You've changed everything for the better," Martha said one day, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I only did what was right. This place, it's not just a mansion. It's a home, and you are all a part of it, I replied, feeling a sense of belonging for the first time. The mansion was bustling with new life. I hosted charity events, reopened the gardens to the public, and used the estate's wealth to help those in need. One day, as I was overseeing renovations, Mr. Jenkins, the old butler, approached me. "Katrina, you've done remarkable things. Your parents would have been proud," he said, his voice warm with pride. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I hope to continue their legacy and make this place a beacon of hope and kindness," I replied, feeling a connection to my past and a drive to shape a better future. One evening, I stood on the balcony overlooking the estate. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the land that was now mine. I thought about the journey, the battles fought, and the victories won. "Katrina, what are you thinking about?" Sam asked, joining me on the balcony. "I'm thinking about how far we've come. We've faced deceit and hardship, but we've come out stronger," I said, my voice reflective. "It's a new era for this mansion, and you're the one leading it," Sam said, admiration in his eyes. "Yes, it's a new era indeed, but it's not mine alone. It's ours, everyone who has been wronged, who has fought for justice," I said, turning to look at the horizon. As night fell, the mansion lit up, a symbol of enduring strength and a testament to the power of truth. I knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it. With a sense of purpose and determination, I stepped into my role, not just as the owner of the mansion, but as a guardian of its legacy and a protector of those who had no voice. With the conclusion of Katrina's riveting story of reclamation and justice, I'm eager to engage you all in a deeper, more thought-provoking conversation. Reflecting on Katrina's actions and the moral complexities she faced, here's a question that I believe will spark some intriguing discussions. If you were in Katrina's position, would you have considered granting forgiveness to the Harringtons for their betrayal and deceit? Or would you have steadfastly held on to your decision for justice, as she did? This question delves into the heart of human emotions and ethics. It's about the power of forgiveness versus the weight of justice in the face of deep betrayal and deception. Do you believe in offering second chances even in cases of severe wrongdoing? Or is strict retribution the more appropriate response? Please, share your views in the comments below. I'm genuinely interested in understanding how each of you perceives such complex moral dilemmas. And while you're sharing your thoughts, if you found Katrina's story compelling and our journey together on this channel enriching, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing for more thought-provoking stories and discussions. Your interaction and support are what drive this channel forward, and I look forward to reading each of your insightful comments and continuing our journey with more stories that challenge and inspire. Thank you for being part of this adventure, and don't forget to voice your thoughts below.